Well, as many of you know, for a number of months, our elder board has been folded into our deacon board because we don't have currently enough elders per our bylaws to have a proper elder board. And so the elder board, again, has been folded into the deacon board. Now, this is not ideal because the vision you see set forth in the scriptures for governance of a church is having two separate leadership teams, an elder team, an elder board, and a deacon board. And so we as a leadership team have been keen on reestablishing that elder board by nominating someone to serve as an elder so that pending approval, we would have then 5 elders so that we could then move back to that framework of having 2 boards, an elder board and a deacon board. I recognize that even this mention of an elder board can bring up a lot of different emotions in people. And the reason we're moving towards this is not our idea. One of the things and the themes that you see in Scripture, both described and prescribed, is that of establishing an elder board. For example, do you remember in Acts 14, where Paul goes back to churches that he helped start, and he appoints elders for them in each church. So Luke's description of Paul's continuing work in the church is establishing elders. Paul himself prescribes this to Titus. Titus, the reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. So we want to move towards this because that's the model that you see in Scripture. So with that, the board has nominated a brother, Stan. I invite him to come forward, and he's going to very briefly introduce himself to us. Stan.
Thank you, Pastor Justin. Good morning, 大家好. Every time I use Chinese, everyone laughs. 什么好笑？我的中文好笑，对不对？你们的英文也有一点好笑。So, I appreciate Pastor Lenny brings everyone together, so it makes my life easier. So I don't have to go to all the different services to introduce myself. We can just do it once. I think on the next slide, just a little bit about myself. So I've lived in Carmel for 38 years. 38 years in the same zip code, 46032. All in that zip code. And for those same 38 years, I've attended this church. So I grew up here, attended a Sunday school, attended youth group here, and so this is definitely home. But if you do the math, it's a little bit off. I'm 44 years old. So I spent 4 years in Philadelphia at college. That's where I met my wife, Allison, and then 2 years in the Bay Area for graduate school. We have 3 children. You see them in the picture, Lucy, Potter, and Lane. And that was on a trip we had this past summer. And my day job is I work at a company called Telemon Corporation here in Carmel. I've had a chance to serve in the church in a lot of different capacities. But I thought one thing that I would do for this introduction, maybe that is a little bit different, is just share a little bit about how I think about the church and the elder board and some of the priorities and principles that we have. So on this next slide, which is the last slide, one thing that's very important to me is this idea of governance. I don't know the Chinese word for governance. That one's a complicated one. But we have a church that is a plural elder-led church. There's many elders that come together as a group. And that's very important. In that elder model, both when you add an elder or when you add a pastor, that's an important component there because that sets the direction of the church. And it's much harder to get rid of an elder or a pastor later on, right? So when we're making those decisions as a church, we should be very, very thoughtful about who we add. And so you should be thinking about that. You should be thinking about me in this case. And it's okay to vote no, right? So one of the first Chinese words I feel like that kids learn is 不好意思, right? Oh, 不好意思, 不好意思. It's not 不好意思. In this case, we want us to exercise good judgment in terms of who we approve to the elder board. And so, a couple other things that I think about beyond kind of affirming this plural elder model. From a strategy standpoint, my opinion, and it's not like I get to decide anything, right? It's the elder board decides this. My opinion is that if we're one church, we should have one strategy. But right now we have 3 congregations, and sometimes the congregations do different things. And so that's a big decision for us. One church, one strategy. If we have 2 strategies or 3 strategies, we should be 2 churches or 3 churches, right? It's hard to go in those different directions. So that's one thing that I would be thinking about. And the other thing from a financial standpoint, again, my opinion, is that I think we should give more as a church and spend more as a church. Those have to go hand in hand, right? We can't spend if we don't have the money coming in. But I think a lot about the parable of the talents. And I feel like that this church, with the kind of people we have in the church, the location that we have in the church, we have a lot of talents, and we're burying our talents. And so that would be one thing that I would encourage us as a church, and it would be my, hopefully, influence on the elder board. At the end of the day, I think there will be an announcement in the bulletin. There's a Zoom session. So if you have any questions about that, if you want to understand more kind of my philosophy, my perspective, I invite you to attend that Zoom session, and you should ask questions. And if you disagree, then you should vote no, and that's fine. It saves me a lot of time, makes my life easier. But just excited to be able to serve. If everyone approves that, God willing, and that gives you a sense of how I think about church and our direction. Thank you.